What's up, guys? Thanks so much for clicking on the video. My name is Leah, and let's recap and review Real Housewives of Salt Lake City. This is season 6, episode 4. And girl, all I can say is Bronwyn's mom is a nasty somebody, and Brittany is a deadbeat. like clear as day. Clear as day, a deadbeat mother. Girl, therapy. But let's get into the video. Know sometimes before we get into the review, we get a little spicy, just a little bit. Well, I did a standalone spicy corner. If you're interested, please check it out. I'll put the thumbnail on the screen and the link for it will be in the description box below. Pretty much I talked about Angie versus Wendy's and also Meredith talking about Bronwyn. So it seems like that friendship is gonna be short-lived because I also saw an article that during Fashion Week, Jessel from Real Housewives of New York said that she was sitting with Bronwyn. Meredith saw them and basically completely ignored them. So yeah, trouble in paradise is over there. But you're interested in listening to my thoughts, please check out that video. But let's get into All right, y'all. So let's get into this review. So it opens up where it left off, which we're at Lisa's failed luncheon. Baby gorgeous, this was not effective. It was not. Oh my gosh. And so you got Whitney pacing up and down the hallway after Lisa whacked her real good by asking her, so how is it unwinding your business? And Whitney didn't really have a rebuttal to that, to stick it back at Lisa. And Whitney's at her confessional saying if Lisa wanted this luncheon to go over well, then she would be willing to answer our questions and not jumping down our throats. And I do agree. Lisa is the one that brought them to this luncheon. She should have been prepared for the questions that were going to be asked of her. But I think in Lisa's mind, she just wanted to stick it to everybody and thought seeing the poster boards and everything saying dismiss was going to be effective. And it's like, girl, no ma'am. Like, they have questions. You should have been prepared to answer them. But I also think Lisa was defensive because she heard that they were talking poorly about her on the camping trip when she wasn't there. And she was hurt by hearing Angie say things about her because she thought her and Angie were cool, and then now she's sitting at a table and majority of the table is whacking her like real tough, real hard. Okay, so Whitney says in her confessional that Lisa's acting like an irrational toddler. And I said, that's rich coming from you. When we saw you last episode throw a napkin in her face, you were lunging practically across the table, yelling at her. Then you went around the table and got this close to her face, screaming in her ear. And then you are now in the hallway trying to self-regulate because you can't handle your emotions. But she's a toddler and you're throwing a temper tantrum. Make that make sense to me. Okay, so Whitney's like, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to wait Lisa out. I'm not going to stoop to her level. I'm going to wait until Lisa tuckers herself out. But what I found comical about this was Whitney had to come back to the table because one, nobody was going to go check up on her. And two, Angie and Lisa were still arguing. So no one cared about Whitney being in the hallway. And I think she realized like, oh crap, let me get back in there. Okay, so then, well, before I continue on, I will say this confessional of Whitney looks way better than that blue and with the orange hair. Orange hair don't look good on Whitney. This blonde with the dark roots looks great, and I love the lime green top, okay? So we get back to the table and Lisa and Angie are still going at it, where Lisa says, you are the one that said the nastiest thing about me. And it flashes back to Amy's party where Brittany tells Lisa that Angie compared her to Jen Shaw. So then Lisa says, girl, you're the one out here claiming that you own all of these salons, but you only own 1.5 lunatic fringe. So then Angie's like, girl, what are you talking about? What are you talking about, Lisa? Like, who told you that? That doesn't make any sense. And then Angie's like, that's not true. And Lisa was like, well, the rest of your salons are franchises. So then Angie starts yelling, saying, I have 3 salons that I own, and the rest, I guess, are franchises. So then Angie's like, that's a business model that I am proud of. So then Lisa's like, but you're always going on and on about how you own 10 salons, but you really don't. So then Angie stands up, and I told y'all I'm getting sick of Angie standing up. And y'all know I like Angie, Mary, and Lisa. Them the 3 that I watched this show for, and it's been like that since season 4. Okay. But I'm getting tired of Angie standing up because it's getting corny and it's already been played out. But now we're entering the cornball factor, because I'm like, you don't have to stand up every time you get into an argument with Lisa. We're going to see her stand up on the next episode when she gets into an argument with Lisa. And I'm like, Angie, at this point, you're doing it for attention. And I'm looking at Angie like, if they ever put somebody on this cast that will match Angie's energy, in the sense of like, when Angie stands up, they stand up and they get active with her, she not gonna know how to handle it. Because so far she's been doing this since season 4, and nobody has ever stood up with her. But I wonder what she will do if somebody stands up with her and they get to yelling and pointing their fingers and doing all of this with her. How is she gonna react to that? So I need Angie, girl, sit down. Sit down, ma'am. So then Angie's like, I own 7 salons, and then she was about to complete her sentence saying like the rest are franchise. But I thought she said she owned 3 salons earlier on and the rest were franchises, but I don't know. So then Lisa's like, no, you own 1.5 salons. So then Angie's like, all you do is lie and you throw things out there to insult me. So then in the confessional, Angie is saying she finally figured out Lisa's tactics. She lies to deflect and make somebody else the target. So the conversation continues on with Lisa saying, I didn't lie, and I did not insult you. She said, you took it as an insult. Bronwyn's face, when Bronwyn was like, girl, I know she just did not say that. And I will give credit to the rest of the ladies at the table except for Amy, because everybody else was engaged. You know, everyone was making faces, having little side comments and things of that nature. But Amy was just sitting there looking like a deer caught in headlights, trying to understand what was happening. And I was like, okay, it's starting to make sense why you didn't make the cut for the show, lady. Because, girl, this is your opportunity to chime in, say something, but just don't sit there, make a face. Bronwyn was funny with one face for me. Where you at, lady? Where you at? So Angie was like, Lisa, you don't know what you're talking about. And maybe you don't understand because you do French fries, I do franchises. This didn't land for me, okay? Just like a lot of y'all told me the gout dick sucker comment didn't land for you. But this didn't land for me mainly because you're trying to shame Lisa for having brand deals when I'm like, she's the one that has the most brand deals out of all of y'all sitting at this table. She's worked with Lysol, she has a partnership with Wendy's, and she's worked with Kerastase. The rest of y'all don't have that, or it's not the same effect, because then we later on in the conversation we hear Angie saying that she's been a partner with them for years, but I'm like, is it to the same level as Lisa? So I was like, I get what Angie was saying, but the read just didn't land for me. Okay, so you have Lisa like, what? And then you have Heather and Mary kind of like trying to decipher what she just said, and then Heather explains to Mary what Angie said, and then you hear Mary say, oh, that's a good one. And I'm like, is it a good one if you have to have someone explain it to you? I don't think it is. So the conversation continues on, and next thing you know, you hear Angie say, why don't you invest in your son's line that I put on my shelves? So then they flash a picture across the screen where we find out that back in 2021, Lisa's sons pretty much started a brand called Fresh Wolf, which is a male grooming line. And so Angie is like, you do nothing to help market it. She's like, you're always out here peddling these partnerships and things of that nature. You're doing this one with Kerastase, and you could tell that Lisa was caught off guard with Angie speaking about her son's line, because she was like she couldn't believe Angie went there with her. And she was like, Angie ends up saying, I have a partnership with them. I've had it for 26 years. And then Lisa's like, I don't peddle. They liked my shiny, pretty hair. That's why they asked me to be a part of their line. So then Angie's like, why are you not promoting their line? Why aren't you promoting your son's line? So then Lisa was like, it's a luxury men's line. Like, what are you talking about? So then Angie ends up saying, it's a C line. It didn't really really belong on my shelves anyway. Basically saying that she was like doing charity work for her friend. And so Lisa's like, girl, like, okay. And then Angie's like, girl, it belongs in Walmart. And I said, girl, not too much on Walmart. Cause I stay in Walmart. Okay. Especially if something's on clearance, I might get it. And I was like, Angie, when Angie said that, I was just like, yeah. I don't think she should have said that. And the reason why I say that is it opens her daughter up for scrutiny. And if Lisa was quick enough, she would have responded back to Angie by saying, at least my children have a line. What does Electra have to her name? Nothing. Because that would have been my response back to Angie. So you're calling my son's line a C line. At least they had the business acumen to start a line. But what does your child do? What did she do, Angie? And then it probably would have caused a fight because now, so I don't think Angie should have said that because I'm like, you opening up yourselves for people to start talking about your kid. Because that would have been my response to her if I was Lisa. So Lisa ends up saying, you're a very jealous human being. And then you see Bronwyn over there like, Jesus. Because Bronwyn even is like, oh, we hitting into some like really bad territory. We need to reverse it back. You know, we need to reel it in. The argument continues on with Lisa yelling across the table at Angie. You have questioned everything I've ever had. Stop. And she is like, when I tell you, I was like, oh my God, Lisa, breathe, girl. You gonna get that Erica Mena vein in your neck and in your forehead. So then Lisa's in the confessional pretty much saying, like, at this point, it's ridiculous. Like, you're sitting here talking down about my kid's line, basically saying whether or not it's an A-list or a C-list business. Like, how low? Okay. So then at the table, you hear Meredith say, no one wants to hear their business being called a C-level business. Like, can we just admit, Angie, like that was not a nice thing to say? And so Angie doesn't say anything. You then have Heather jumping into the conversation. And I will admit, I was slightly impressed. I said, not Heather with a backbone. Okay. Not Miss Heather with a backbone. So Heather basically tells Lisa, I feel like you were absolutely, totally unfairly attacked on the camping trip because you weren't there to defend yourself. She was like, I can understand that you have a desire to clear up your name, but for you to go low bringing up her businesses, like her franchises and her money, it didn't need to go there. And then she turns her energy towards Angie, which I was surprised by because I didn't think she was going to chastise both ladies, but she ends up saying, and Angie, for you to flip it back on her and then say that the line that she developed with her children is a C-list business, like it's some type of diss, was not okay. And then Angie was like, it's not a diss. And what was funny to me is like, as much as people say they don't like Lisa, it's like a lot of these women have the same tendencies as Lisa. It's just you like them. Because for Angie did the same thing Lisa did. When Lisa said the whole thing about like, Angie was like, you insult me all the time. And Lisa was like, I didn't lie and I didn't insult you. You took it as an insult. Angie saying it wasn't a diss. It was a diss. You basically told her that her children's like line was beneath you and should be at Walmart. It was absolutely a diss, Angie. What are you talking about? So then Heather ends up saying, I'm not afraid to say to you that you didn't need to go that low. She was like, and it's absolutely horrible what you two were saying to each other. You then have her saying that I'm not friends with you because of your legal filings. I'm not friends with you, Angie, because of your sponsorships. She was like, honestly, I have a great time with y'all, but we can say that this was not a great time. Basically, Heather is telling Lisa, this whole luncheon, floppy honest, sis. It wasn't good. And she was like, I think everyone here can say the same, that this wasn't it. So then she goes on to say that, Lisa, you are a fearless and strong person. And when you are on someone's side, you feel invincible. But when you aren't on someone's side, you feel completely vulnerable. And then Lisa's like, there are times that I do feel vulnerable in this group. And then Mary chimes in, but she was like, but we never see it, Lisa. Like, you never show it. And that is true. I don't think Lisa feels safe around these people. I think she feels like if she does show vulnerability, that they will laugh in her face and they won't take it as such. And honestly, the viewers are also proving that, because I saw the clip for next episode where Lisa is crying about her relationship with John, and everyone is like rolling their eyes in the comments and like saying, oh, this is fake. But then y'all scream about her not being vulnerable or honest about her feelings. And then when we get a true representation of that, y'all scoff at it. The same with this scene right here where people are like, well, why is she saying she grew up different? She probably did grow up different. All of these women have grown up different. And maybe she feels as though it's not on the same level as them, but it is a different experience. Lisa said at the last reunion, like she was like, I was a middle child. My parents didn't know where I was most of the time. I could have been sex trafficked. And I'm always and when she said that, I was wondering why Andy didn't ask her more about that. There's probably a reason why Lisa feels lonely and why she clings so tightly onto John and her two sons, because maybe she didn't feel seen as a child. So she ends up saying, I grew up different than everybody else. She was like, and just because my vulnerability looks different from you guys doesn't mean I'm not being vulnerable, because I can be very vulnerable. And so then she even tells Angie, and I think Lisa in her weird way does love Angie and misses her friendship with her, because she says, Angie Katsanevas, I love you. And she was like, and I'm very sensitive when it comes to you. And the fact that she admitted that, I think says a lot about how Lisa feels about Angie. And she says, here I am being vulnerable. And she was like, I'm being extremely vulnerable. Okay, you guys? She was like, because when you love somebody and they do something that hurts you, it hurts harder, which is true. And she was like, I thought we were in a good place. And that's why I keep asking y'all, where did Lisa and Angie fall off for Angie to be on that first episode dogging her out? It threw me off that Angie has so much to say. So she was just like, and to hear, Lisa goes on to say, and to hear the conversation you guys were having at the campsite, it really hurt me. And she was like, I didn't expect that from you. So then Angie's like, well, Lisa, I apologize. But it's like, girl, I don't know. I don't think you meant it. I don't think you meant it. So then Angie says, I feel the same way about you, Lisa. Like, I really care about you. And when you do things, it hurts me as well. So then Lisa turns her attention to Heather. And she's like, Heather, I'm your biggest champion. And she's like, I really love you, Heather. And you can tell that Heather needed to hear that, because Heather started breaking down. I said, oh my God, Heather. Heather really loves her some Lisa Barlow. Like, you could tell that she needed to hear that from her. It was like, oh my God, Regina George has noticed me. Oh my God. So she was like, I love the fact that you're so hard on me. And she was like, you have to surround yourself with people that are thriving. And she was like, and I don't say things I don't mean. I said, I don't know about that, Lisa. And then she turns her attention to Bronwyn, and she was like, Bronwyn and I have some things to work on. And she was like, even when I'm irritated with you, Bronwyn, and I say things like I don't like you, she was like, I understand you even when you don't think I do understand you. So then Bronwyn says, I don't take pleasure in this stuff that I'm hearing about you, Lisa. She was like, I just wanted you to stop talking about me, And she was like, I know I have said things to hurt you, and you have said things to hurt me. And when you're ready to admit that, I think we can be able to move on. So then Lisa basically says, let's have a toast, where she's like, we love each other and we love hard. And, they toast their glasses and the scene is over. And one thing I will give Salt Lake City is they know how to move on from situations and still be okay. And still be all right. I think online someone said that I think either Heather or Mary or somebody admitted after they had that argument, they went to one of Lisa's premier lounge, tequila lounge, and they danced the night away. And it's like, they know this is a job, but they also know they got problems. But I think this group really does understand that they are an ensemble cast, and they gonna get to this money. And I love it. So okay. The next scenes we get is kind of like B-reel footage a little bit, but a little bit more, where we see Seth, Meredith, and their daughter Chloe, who I did not recognize because she didn't have the blonde hair, at Meredith's store. We find out that Meredith wants to set up like a small little jewelry area, and then she also wants to I don't know if she wants to turn the store into a caviar lounge or if the caviar lounge is going to be added to the store. But I just thought it was funny how they have like an upstairs, but it's like an attic area. And she was like, oh, we could build up. And so Seth was like, Chloe, get on my shoulders. And the way that Meredith turned into a mom so quick, she was like, watch her head. I was like, oh my God. I was like, oh, Meredith really is a mom, because she was like, watch her head. It's lights up there. And she was trying to push something open. I didn't expect Seth to have like the shoulder strength to pick up his daughter. So I thought that was funny. We then get this scene of Heather and Mary, and they were talking about the night before and how they were drinking a bunch of Lisa's tequila, and Heather was like, I can't do that no more, I'm tired. And Mary was just like, why? And she was like, you didn't drink any of the tequila? And she was like, no, it tastes like hospital. And Heather made a face like, Mary. And it goes back to season 1 where Jen Shaw and Mary got into it because Mary told her she smelled like hospital after Jen Shaw left the hospital after her aunt had to get her legs amputated, or one of her legs amputated. And so Heather's like, the hospital has a smell and a taste. And Mary's like, yeah, every place has a smell and a taste. Heather, what are you talking about? The next thing we have is a Whitney and Justin at their house putting back up her stripper pole. And when I tell you, Whitney and Ashley Darby, they're cousins. They're cousins because there's nothing wrong with having a stripper pole, but it's something so raunchy about both of them that I'm like, yeah, y'all would be best of friends. y'all are related, okay? So they're putting up the pole, and Whitney is dancing all sexy in front of Justin, and then she ends up saying how she wished she could go back 5 years ago when the talk of the town was about her having a stripper pole in her house, and how, like, it was like the juiciest gossip in the neighborhood. Like, the moms in the carpool line would talk about it, and I was like, y'all really are sexually repressed in Utah, because a stripper pole is nothing. Like, I have been in so many apartments with people with stripper poles. That's when I found out that they moved. I did not know that they moved. I always thought that people were like just swinging themselves around, and I didn't know that the pole itself was like twisty. So I'm just like, I don't know, like, that is crazy to me that was like hot gossip in Utah. But like I said, sexually repressed, because a stripper pole ain't nothing. That's like 101, you know? And so Whitney was talking about how, like, she didn't really care that it was the word around town. But then she said when she became a CEO and the business failing, she just feels like because it fell so abruptly, this was like a sign from God that she needs to get back to who she used to be and things of that nature. She was like, she felt like she was one of those flowers that closed herself up during the time of her being a CEO. And now it's time for her to, like, open her flower. I said, girl, what? So you talking about the business fail? It's time to get back on the pole? Is that what we're saying? I don't know. I feel like there had to be a different business venture for Whitney. Like, maybe she could do pole dancing classes. I mean, I don't know. Maybe there are some moms who would be interested in learning how to pole dance from Whitney. Or maybe she could have hooked up with somebody who does, like, lingerie. I don't know. It's just like this, like, the whole skincare and like jewelry line it doesn't fit her. So it's just kind of like, why not? The same reason why I'm mad at Candace for not having triangles, girl. Where is Kleenex? You could have had something. But it's just like, I don't know. It's just the Wild Rose Beauty, like, she don't give me a beauty girl, a glamour girl. Like, Giselle doing eyelashes made sense to me because she's always talking about her eyes and she's the green-eyed bandit. That's the name Karen gave her. But I'm just like, this line just didn't make sense for Whitney. So I just don't understand, why can't we pivot to something that will be more in line with who you are, and you probably would make way more money with it, So the next thing we have is of Bronwyn going over to meet up with Lisa. Mind you, the way that Bronwyn came up on that curve, I was tickled because that's me. That is me. I be overestimating when I drive sometimes. Oh, I also liked her money purse. That was cute. It was like $1 bill. I was like, oh, this is cute. So she pulls up into the Premier Lounge. You got Lisa sitting down going over paperwork, and Bronwyn was like, oh my gosh, this is cute. And we find out that, like, she hasn't really been there before. So she was like, when did you launch this lounge? And Lisa was like, oh, back in June. She was like, we had a lot of people from Sundance come and, like, party on the stage. And Bronwyn was like, well, that's your favorite thing to say, basically tell us you do Sundance and stuff. And it got really awkward. They both kept saying to each other. And pretty much we're like, where do we go from here? So then Lisa says, breaking up the tension, she basically said she felt like there were too many voices yesterday, and she was just like, they couldn't really hear each other, but she really wants to have this conversation with Bronwyn. So the conversation continues, and we get an updated confessional from Lisa. Amen. Because Lisa, that initial confessional was horrid. that like your eye looked wonky, like you were recovering from like a stroke or something. The hair wasn't doing it. But Lisa did say on Watch What Happens Live that they did touch ups. This looks way better. Way better on Lisa. So Lisa just talks about how she feels as though her and Bronwyn owe it to their friendship to actually have a conversation with each other one-on-one without everyone around. So Lisa pretty much says that damaging things were said. And she says, and I'm sorry about that. She was like, I think it stems from your hurt feelings about our relationship and my hurt feelings about our friendship as well. So when Bronwyn ends up saying, I don't want to like sparse out the different things that we did to each other. Like, I just want to say, if we're being honest, we both did things purposefully to hurt each other. And some may say unintentionally to hurt each other. And Lisa was like, yeah, it's been hurtful. It's been hurtful. So then Lisa says, I think I didn't realize that some of the things that I said were a big deal to you guys, and I want to take accountability for that. And I was like, okay, Lisa, not you taking accountability. Okay. So then they flash back to the reunion where Bronwyn is pretty much chastising Lisa because remember, Lisa had a relationship with Gwen's father's side of the family. And Bronwyn pretty much says, you spoke to his mother and basically they told you that I faked a miscarriage. Lisa's crying saying, yes, I did. And yes, they did tell me that. And Bronwyn was like, you knew what that would be like bringing that story to this show. But I'm like, I don't remember Lisa bringing that story to the show. But she could have, but I don't remember her doing that. Maybe it was like an unforeseen footage and they didn't air it for us, but I'm not sure. So then Lisa says, I'm sorry that hurt you guys. I'm sorry that happened. She was like, that was never my intentions to hurt y'all. So then Bronwyn says, I want to be clear with you. Like, I don't believe that was your intention. She was like, from the beginning, I've told you I was nothing but appreciative and grateful for you doing that. So then they actually end up showing us text messages where Lisa was like, yeah, you thanked me. And they show us the text message, and the text messages say this from Bronwyn saying, you're the best for doing this today. Thank you. It was hard for me to talk about, but can you imagine it with anyone other than you? I'd had died. So thank you for making it easier. And then it flashbacks to when Lisa and Bronwyn were at like the spa, and Bronwyn was saying that it was really hard for her to reconcile the fact that Lisa has this great relationship with Gwen's father's side of the family, and for the past 18 years they have done nothing to show up in her child's life. And Lisa starts crying saying, my heart breaks for all of you guys. So Bronwyn ends up saying, I never felt anything other than appreciative for you talking to these people and putting your relationship with them in a weird place. So everybody can stop saying that Bronwyn's real issue with Lisa is about, her talking to Gwen's side of the family. Her issue was that Lisa busted her out for lying about that necklace. That's what the issue was. Okay. So, the conversation continues on where Bronwyn basically says, I thought we were in a good place. And Lisa says, I thought we were in a good place too. But she said at the pace that we're going at right now, we're pretty much racing to the bottom. She was like, I don't feel like I need to defend my life every time I'm around you. But she was like, I can take accountability for the things that I have done towards you. So then Lisa brings up, the reason why I get so defensive is when you brought up John, he's my everything and he's one of my biggest triggers. And she was like, if you don't work with him or have business with him, like, I freak out. So what you said about him bothered me. So then Bronwyn was like, I don't think me saying that he's tired was like something nasty. Me saying that he's stressed out by you. But then you saying that I suck dick for money or for clothes, I just feel like was messed up. And like, it's just us racing to the bottom. She was like, I feel like the comment was pretty low and you pretty much called me a whore. And Lisa was like, I never called you a whore and I don't think you are a whore. So then Bronwyn pretty much says, I don't want to continue to make low comments with you. And she was like, I want to be able to exist in this friend group and make it easy for everybody. And, and she was like, I don't want us to get very like dark and twisted with each other. She was like, I don't want it to go there anymore. So pretty much, Bronwyn admits that she's hurt Lisa. Lisa admits it as well. And she's just like, going forward, I don't think we need to say anything about each other's husbands. So Lisa was like, yeah, you don't say nothing about John. I won't say nothing about Todd. you know? And she again says, I'm sorry about that. You know what I'm saying? She was like, I will remain neutral. And Bronwyn was like, that's what I want. I want us to remain neutral. And then Bronwyn says, I don't want anything else said about my husband. So, you know, nothing else. Nothing else. And then Lisa says, and kids are off limits as well. And Bronwyn was like, well, girl, I ain't never said nothing about your kids. Never said nothing about your kids. So she was like, I hope your son comes back safe. I hope Jack is on his way back from his mission. And Lisa's like, yo, he'll be back in 2 months. And Bronwyn was like, oh, wow, 2 months is a big deal. And she was like, you know, Gwen is still living with us as well as my mom. And so then Lisa's like, oh my gosh, you have like a full house. And she was like, you know, the other day she got really upset because me and Gwen got into a little argument, and she was like, she didn't feel comfortable with us arguing. She was like, it makes me sick to my stomach. So then Lisa was like, oh, it probably triggered her. And Bronwyn was like, yeah, that's what she said. It did trigger her. But then her mom was like, you know, parents should be grandparents first until they're actual parents, because she feels as though being Gwen's grandparent has made her so open-minded and soft. And then Bronwyn was like, she really needed to hear that from her mom, because she feels as though that sometimes she can be extremely rigid. And she was like, you know, I like to control how people think about and feel about me. And Lisa was like, yeah, you do. yeah, you do. I can see that in you. So then in the confessional, Bronwyn says, you know I can be rigid, and sometimes I can be very difficult to be around people because they feel as though I don't accept them. And she said, mostly I realize that doesn't serve me. And she kind of hesitates to say, but she was like, also, I don't want to be like my mom. And she was like, is that an awful thing to say? And I said, no, it's not, because your mom is a nasty lady, a nasty somebody, okay? But you can tell that Bronwyn is still struggling with that. So then at the end of the conversation, Lisa was like, I think we had a wonderful conversation. We didn't raise our voices. We we should be impressed with ourselves. And then Bronwyn was like, honestly, I think that's more impressive for you because, I cut people, you yell. And I said, ooh, not Bronwyn throwing shade. And then they hug each other. And that was the end of their conversation. So I wonder how long they're going to remain neutral with each other. I wonder what's going to reignite their issues, or maybe what may start reigniting their issues is when Bronwyn and Meredith get into it. I don't know, but it was nice to see Lisa apologize and not put if, and it was nice to see Bronwyn apologize and them come to some type of resolution, so we're not watching them argue the entire season. I appreciate that. Okay. The next scene we have is with Mary and her church. I'm gonna be honest, I don't like the scenes with Mary and her church because they be weird. And then whenever they talk about, the grandmother, it get weird. And I like Mary. I just, So we see that the church has been getting renovated, I guess, for the past 2 years. When they pan that camera to that lady with that portrait of her and God, I said, why? First of all, why is Jesus white? Why is God white? He couldn't be black. Questions, okay? I'm like, the portrait itself isn't even what's taking me out, because I've seen portraits like that as a child. But normally, Jesus is black in them portraits. At least in my family, he is. So we're in the church. Mind you, the church does not look different. So I was like, what were they renovating? Were they putting new chairs in the church? I was confused. But we see Mary in the church with her cousin, Big Joe. We find out that Big Joe is a general contractor, and he's been the one that's been renovating the church. Mary notices on one of the pews that there are like nails sticking out of it. And she was like, oh, we got to fix that. And I'm like, Big Joe, do you not do quality control with your stuff? Like, sir, why are there nails sticking out of the pews, Big Joe? Like, what's up with that? So Mary and him are just looking at different things. She's like, oh, I need you to fix that. I need you to fix that. Mind you, she looked good in this purple. That all purple with the purse, it looked great. So Mary's in her confessional being like, I don't understand why these renovations took so long. She was like, Big Joe is family, but he's definitely milking being family. So they sit down in the church and they just start talking. And Mary just is like, I'm excited for things to happen again. And Big Joe is like, is Robert happy about coming back to church? And Mary's like, yeah, he's actually really excited. And so Big Joe is like, oh, I remember when he took his first steps, like across the pulpit, and everyone was shocked and cheering for him. And Mary was like, yes, I remember that. And he was like, how is he doing? And Mary's like, he's doing good, but like our relationship has gotten stronger, 100 times better. But it's also hurtful because now I can tell when he's falling off the wagon. You know what I mean? So then the conversation continues on, and she's like, I just hope like things get, better. And so Big Joe starts to get emotional, and she's like, are you crying? And he's like, I just need a moment. And he's like, he's such a like sharp kid. Like he's so smart. And Mary's like, yes, he is smart. And so she was just like, I think church will help him. And she talks about how Mama, which is their grandmother, called her and told her it was time for her to come home and get saved because, she was living in the world. She was too worldly, okay? And so she was like, I came back and it worked for me. So she's just like, I'm hoping that him being in church will help him too. And I'm like, yes, church is helpful, but he also needs an outlet other than church. Like, hopefully he has new friends now, current time, and he is getting better, So, Big Joe basically tells her that, you've done a wonderful job holding things together. And Mary was like, oh my God, thank you, Big Joe. And she was just like, for so long, I felt like I was going through a storm. And he was like, yeah, I feel the same way. And then she starts talking about her own mother, where she was like, for so many reasons, I don't she was always coming at me. She also was like, I don't understand why she thought she was supposed to inherit everything. I don't get why she thought that when we had talks about this before Mama passed away. And so Big Joe was like, I don't get it either. I don't know why she thought that either. And they talk about how Mama told, Robert Sr. to marry Mary. And how like he did whatever my mama told him to do. So she was like, when Mama passed away, my mom thought she was supposed to take everything over. And she was just like, I don't get why she thought that. And Big Joe was just like, she wanted all the power. And Mary's like, yes, she did. And then they talked about how like the mom came in there with like a gang of people. And I guess they thought they was going to overtake the church, but they ended up calling the police and got them up on out of there. So then she talks about how like once her mom passed away, it felt like a ending to a chapter in her life. She said she wanted to have a conversation or a relationship with her mom, but her mom didn't want that. And Mary says she pretty much respected her mom's wishes, but she also didn't appreciate her mom putting stories out there about her. And they did flash across the screen different stories that were, out there about Mary. I read a few of the ones that were flashed across the screen, and she was like, a lot of that stuff was hurtful. And Mary starts to get emotional, but she was like, with my mom passing away, it's like the absence is still there, but I guess it's easier for her to deal with because her mom chose not to speak to her, and it's like she's no longer here, so it just feels like everything is more official. She was like, things still hurt, but I guess she's at the point where it's like, I can kind of move on with it because there's no area for them to ever reconcile. So she starts crying. She pulls out a Louis Vuitton, face mask and starts blowing her nose on it, not knowing what it is. And that's where the scene ends. So the next scene we have is with Angie, and we find out that she allowed her cosmetology license to lapse. So now she has to retake some of her exams to get it reinstated. And so Heather is there to be one of her test dummies because right now she's just been working on mannequins and things of that nature. So she's putting rollers in her hair. She said something about a perm, but Heather was like, girl, no ma'am. But she's doing rollers. So Angie was like, she wants to create a legacy and she wants to be a cosmetologist. That's how she got her start. So she takes pride in it. So the next thing they start talking about something that happened between her and Lisa. So we end up seeing Sage, Lisa's personal assistant, go to Angie's place. Angie is telling Heather this story, how she says, this cute girl comes into the salon with me and Sean. I'm thinking she's there to get her hair done, but then she starts talking about she's here to pick up some things, and she's like, hi, I'm Lisa's assistant, and I'm here to get the Fresh Wolf products. Sean and Angie are surprised, like, girl, what? And she was like, yes, I'm here to get the products. So we see Angie go down into her basement of the salon, and she gets the products. She blows off the dust off the products, and she puts them in this crate, and she's like, these are heavy. And she was like, also Lisa Venmo'd you $600. And so Heather is like, girl, what? And then she texted me. So you see a text message conversation between Lisa and Angie where Lisa's like, $600 Venmo send. I can send my cleaners to help you out with the dust. So Heather is like, No, she didn't say that to you. And she's like, girl. And so Angie's like, I took offense to it because my salon ain't dusty. So then Angie sends back a text to Lisa saying, you should probably send this $600 to the other people that are claiming that you owe them money. I didn't say you owe me any money, and my salon is not dusty. Your products are though, because they've been sitting here for 2 years. I said, oh my gosh. It's the fact that they showed them them arguing back and forth in text for us. So then Lisa was like, okay, girl, I can raise you one better. Heather is looking at all of this gagged. Like, she can't believe they're arguing in text. So Lisa sent back, well, at least I don't have to borrow money to take vacations and pay it back after using a card I should never have used to begin with. I said, oh. So then Heather is like, what did you say back? And Angie's like, nothing, because I own my own credit card. It's in my name. She was like, I left her on red. Like, I'm not going to argue back and forth with that craziness. And I said, Angie, did she get you? Because, girl, why didn't you have anything else to say back? Like, did Lisa clock you? Because I'm like, Angie, if you could send back what you said about, like, the products were collecting dust, what else? You didn't have nothing else to say? I feel like Lisa whacked you, Angie. And you didn't really have nothing else to say back, because you would have said something back if you had something else to say, because that's how you roll. So I said, oh my gosh. So Heather is like, this is wild. So she was like, I'm not going to. So then Angie again says, I'm not going to engage in the craziness. And Heather's like, I thought you guys left everything okay. Y'all were crying and everything. And Angie was like, I thought everything was okay too, you know? Like, I don't understand it. She was like, Lisa is just a jealous person. She was like, she has that black ball, bowling ball hair, and like, she thinks she's the best thing, and she's not. And so then Heather's like, Angie, this is what makes it hard for me to support you, because then you take like these digs at her, and it's like, I can't really support that. So then Angie's like, so what am I supposed to say, Heather? She's over here accusing me of using somebody else's credit cards to go on vacation. Like, am I just supposed to walk away and turn the other cheek? And then Angie's like, I'm effing pissed, Heather. And so she's like, well, you're going to see her here soon, so what are you going to do? And Angie's like, I don't know how I'm going to react when I see her. And I'm wondering what happened with Lisa and Angie, other than Lisa probably like festering at the thought of Angie saying what she said about her children's business and being like, you know what? I got one for her. But I'm just like, well, Lisa, if you said y'all were cool, then there was no need for you to text her that. Like, there was no need. You could have just told Sage to pick up the products and left it at that. But I think the add effect of Venmoing her the $600 was like, here, girl, take it. Piss Angie off even more. Moving on, we have this scene with Brittany and Whitney. And basically, Brittany admits that she a deadbeat. Like I said, oh my God, like you really are on TV admitting this. So they meet up at this like flower shop because Brittany wants to apologize to Whitney, but also she's trying to get some plants. Brittany basically says, after watching the way that Lisa came at Whitney about her business, she realized that she did the same thing on the camping trip and she felt really bad about it. So she was like, I want to apologize to her. So we actually see Brittany apologize to Whitney, and Whitney accepts the apology. And then Whitney apologizes, saying that she was wrong for what she said about Jared, knowing the relationship between Brittany and Jared. But then she also says that that's not her and she don't go to that level. I said, the lies you tell from the pits of hell, because you always go to that level, lady. So we then end up seeing them move to another part of the building, and it looks like a greenhouse. And while they're in there, Brittany makes a comment about like, oh, this is beautiful. I can't wait to have Jared help me make like a garden wall or something like that. And so Whitney is like, I thought you and Jared called off the engagement. Like, y'all are not together. Like, what are y'all doing? She's like, Brittany, what are y'all doing? And so Brittany was like, no, we are together and we're working to get back to being engaged. And then Whitney was like, well, I thought the kids, like, what about the kids? What about the kids? And she's like, well, we're still talking to them and trying to get them comfortable with the idea of us being together. And Whitney ends up asking Brittany, what do your kids want from you? And they start talking about one of her daughters, Olivia, because I think she has two. And she was like, I think she wants me to just be more consistent with not choosing men over her. And then Brittany is like, but that's super hard with me not choosing men over her, especially because me and Jared are in a good place. I said, what the, ho, is you cool? Like what? What, Brittany? And so she's just like, it's just hard. So then Whitney is looking at her like, so you can't stop dating for a minute in order to prove to your daughter that like she's worthy? You can't do that. You can't stop dating for a couple of minutes. And she's just like, it's just really hard because, that's a big ask, Whitney. Like, because she's always like, coming at me. And it's just like, she doesn't make room for me. And I love that Whitney was like, girl, but you're the parent. And I'm like, yeah, you're the adult, dummy. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And so then Whitney talks about how she was estranged from her mom for a long time, and their mother-daughter relationship wasn't the best because she was similar to Brittany. And she was like, even though I didn't talk to my mom, that didn't mean that I stopped loving her or needing her in my life. She was like, especially when I was going through rough times. She's like, even this time right now, like, she's like, I'm glad that I'm in a better place with my mom because going through my business and everything, it's hard. So she was like, what do you want, Brittany? And Brittany's like, I really want to be there for Olivia, just like how my mom was a rock for me. But like, it's just hard. Like, she's like, what am I supposed to do? Just like stay at home? And then Whitney was like, you need to try for at least 30 days to prove to your daughter that she's worth it. And she's like, the ups and downs with Jared in your dating life, you don't think that's messing up what you got going on with your daughter? Like, your daughter seems to be like creating clear boundaries with you. And then like the whole time they're talking, Brittany is like playing with this cactus. Whitney takes the cactus out of her hands and she grabs her and she's like, literally like, Brittany, like, I'm trying to tell you should be more instinctual about this. Like, and the fact that you're not is really making me feel some type of way. Like, do you understand what I'm trying to say to you? Like, do you understand? And Brittany's like, I do. I said, girl, this is why everybody can't be parents. And it's also stupid to think that everyone's like maternal instincts kick in or fatherly instincts kick in when they have children, because that's not the case. That is why abortion is healthcare, because you out here having kids she is having children and she don't give she don't care, because there's no way that she got on national television and admitted that it's hard for her to stop choosing a man over her daughters when this man actively plays in your face consistently, Brittany. Consistently. Girl, you a special kind of delusion, because, oh my gosh, ain't no way. So the next scene we have is with Muzzy and Bronwyn. And y'all know I don't really see it for Bronwyn, but the way that I wanted to come through the TV and like just hug her and tell her I am so sorry that is the parent you had to deal with, because Muzzy has a mean, nasty, stank ass spirit. Like, that lady is just mean. Like, you, like, just mean. Like, I was just like, you really are saying this to your child? So I can only imagine the way you treated her when she was a little girl. And then to hear the stories about the way they treated her when she was pregnant, I was just like, oh, you nasty. You and your husband, nasty spirited people. Because the dad is culpable too, because why would you allow your wife to treat your daughter that way? Nasty. Like, nasty people, okay? So we're at the house and Muzzy is trying to fold one of Bronwyn's like blow up outfits or costumes she wears to go pick up Todd. We see her daughter and her daughter's boyfriend leaving the house talking about, we're gonna go to our bowling league. And the mom is like, y'all have a bowling league? And Bronwyn was like, it's not a real league. I thought the same thing. And then I realized that's just their way of saying they want to spend alone time together. And then Muzzy was like, they don't have enough alone time in the east wing of the house. So then Bronwyn was like, can you imagine if I asked for my boyfriend to come stay at the house with us? And Muzzy was like, that would never happen because I would never allow it. And I said, my parents wouldn't allow it either. They wouldn't allow it either. So then in the confessional, which I do not like this confessional of Bronwyn, it's more so it's the makeup. The makeup is throwing it off for me. And low-key the choker. But Bronwyn just talks about how Gwen is at the very age or close to the age of when she got pregnant with her. And she was like, having her mom be around, judging the way that she parents her daughter, she was like, it's bringing up feelings that she didn't think like like she's revisiting the feelings of shame that she thought she had gotten over, and she was like, and she's starting to realize she still maybe feels ashamed about how Gwen was brought into this world, you know. So Muzzy is talking about she's the old generation, and Bronwyn is in the confessional talking about my mom still has this idea about what the perfect Mormon family is supposed to look like. And she was like, I realize I'm never going to fit that for her at this point in my life. So pretty much Bronwyn ends up saying, you know what, Muzzy, it doesn't bother me that he's around. Like, it doesn't bother me. And Muzzy ends up saying, I know it doesn't bother you. And she was like, she's following your example. And so Bronwyn was like, let's be careful with the way we talking, because what do you mean? And Muzzy was like, well, whatever example you're doing is what she's copying. And I said, oh, stank old lady. Okay, stank old mean surly lady. Okay. And so Bronwyn was like, girl, whatever example, don't act like I'm out here in these streets like that doing whatever. Like, just like, let's not do that. She was like, let's not do that, ma'am. So then Muzzy ends up saying, well, the parenting that you're doing, I've never seen it work. So then Bronwyn has to tell her mama, well, the way you parented me didn't work either. You were talking about I shouldn't be having sex, but newsflash, I had sex. BYU tried to stop me from having sex, but it happened anyway. So did it work? Did your parenting style work for you? And then Muzzy says, well, not quite. Because we end up finding out that Bronwyn has 2 other sisters, so it's a total of 3 kids. And I guess in Muzzy's mind, the other 2 did well, but Bronwyn is the one that didn't do so great. So you know what I'm saying? So then Muzzy ends up saying, I've never once was thinking about that you would, have premarital sex, drink and smoke or anything of that nature, because that is what we taught you. I would have put my head on the chopping block and been prepared to say, like, you would never do that. And she was like, any of the other ones didn't do it. Like basically her other 2 sisters didn't do it. And so Bronwyn was like, I know. So then Bronwyn was like, I'm not the biggest fan of the way that you parent me. Like, she was like, I know you do this whole tough love thing, but I'm not the biggest fan of receiving tough love from you. And so Muzzy ends up saying, but you see how better that it works. And Bronwyn is like looking at her like, how does it work? How does it work? And so Bronwyn was like, I would not be jazzed if Gwen had a baby at this time in her life, but I definitely would handle it different. So then she talks about how, like, she was never given a baby shower. She was like, she wasn't even allowed to be excited about being pregnant. Like, they weren't allowed to celebrate her. Then she tells this story about how Bronwyn tells this story in the confessional about when her family went to Baby Gap together. She was like, her and her mom and her sisters went to Baby Gap. She was like, her sisters were pregnant at the same times as she was. She says one of the salespeople came up to her and was like, oh my gosh, you're having a little girl. And I said, oh no, I mean, my sister's having a little girl. So then the lady was like, oh, my bad, I thought you were pregnant. I shouldn't have assumed that you were pregnant, because the mom was also buying baby clothes as well. And the mom was like, so Brown was like, no, I am pregnant. So then the sales associates was like, oh, so you are buying clothes for her. And the mom said, no. And I said, oh, she nasty. She nasty for that. Like, that was nasty. Like, so, like the thing about it is she pregnant. Y'all don't believe in taking her to the clinic, so you might as well just accept that she's pregnant instead of sitting here and shaming her for having a baby. Like, people who do that are like weird to me. Because if you're not going to allow her to go to the clinic and do what needs to be done because you don't want that baby here, then accept that she had the baby, help raise the child, and move on about your life. But to not allow that lady to have a baby shower when her sisters were pregnant is so messed up to me. Like that lady, like, her and her parents are trash. Her parents are trash for that, bro. They are trash for that. Okay. So then Bronwyn was like, you guys didn't make that a happy experience for me. Like, there was no telling that if I was going to have another baby. And look, I didn't have another baby. So then Muzzy was like, well, that's not my fault. And Bronwyn was like, well, Muzzy, you were the one that made me miserable. What do you mean it wasn't your fault? So then Muzzy was like, well, do you know how miserable it was for me to have to hide that? So it's all about you. When I tell you Bronwyn should have kicked that lady out her house, I promise you, she would have been in an apartment on the other side of town. She wouldn't be living out of my house, eating up all my good food. Especially not after this conversation. Her bags would have been packed and she would have been on the streets. Okay? So then Bronwyn basically says in the confessional, she's been trying to like give her mom chances and, you know, and try to understand her. But she was like, I was pregnant almost 20 years ago. And when I'm realizing that the person that's most hurt about my pregnancy is still my mom. And so the mom brings up how the dad was, you know, in the church and how that was like a shame. And Bron was like, I know it was. But she was like, at the end of the day, I wasn't allowed the opportunity to like have my own feelings and to be considered because this was happening to me. This was happening to me. So then the mom ends up saying, also, I felt like there was a period where we were like, you dropped her off as daycare. So I looked at, when I tell y'all, I paused I paused the episode and I said, I know this lady is not about to act like because she actually was a grandparent, this gives her onus to say what she's saying. And then you notice when they were talking, they basically wanted Bronwyn to put the baby up for adoption. Because the mom ends up saying, like, you know, we had her for daycare. So then Bronwyn was like, well, girl, don't act like I wouldn't have taken care of my kids because, girl, I was out here paying bills and all of that stuff and things of that nature. And I would have gotten a second job if I needed to take care of her. So then Muzzy was like, well, we didn't want her to end up in the foster care system. And Bronwyn was like, girl, she was not going to end up in the foster care system. Don't play with me like that, lady. She was like, I would have did everything I needed to do to make sure Gwen was okay, you know? And then she was like, Muzzy, you going to a real dark place. And then Muzzy was like, well, you never wanted her to be adopted. So that I said, oh, so y'all were going to force that. Y'all were trying to force her to get that baby up for adoption. Or what they were trying to do is have them adopt the child and lie about Gwen's, like where Gwen came from. Because that has happened a lot in families too. It happens a lot. So then Muzzy was like, well, we were keeping her. And I said, girl, don't do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. So Muzzy ends up saying she understands that she was doing her best. And then she ends up saying, you know, don't take it that I'm not like proud of you just because I don't say that you're amazing and wonderful. It's just that like I'm very careful because I don't want you to think that you're wonderful and amazing. I don't want you to think that you too good. Oh, I said, oh, get her out of the house expeditiously. Get her out of your house, Bronwyn. Get that lady out your house. Like, because what is that? What is that? Are you serious? Oh, no. She wouldn't be able to live with me. She would not be. That lady is jealous. She is jealous because Bronwyn didn't do it the right way in her eyes. She got knocked up at 19. She had a baby. She was a single mother, but then she landed a big fish, which was Todd. She living in the biggest house. At New York Fashion Week. She on TV. She living her life like it's golden. While her two daughters who did it the right way are probably somewhere in Utah struggling with they poor ass husbands who probably don't give a damn about them. Well, I mean, Todd, I don't know about Todd either. But I'm saying Bronwyn lucked up, and I think the mom is like resentful for that because she wanted Bronwyn to be punished and she wasn't punished enough in her eyes. Because ain't no way you tell your child you don't want her to think she too good. Nasty old unrelated. So the last thing we have is with Meredith and Angie. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't respect this move from Angie. Angie sits down with Meredith. They go to this coffee shop. And Angie decides because Lisa pissed her off in this mad day, she now wants to tell Meredith that Lisa, when Angie and her were not, when Meredith and Angie were not in a good place, Lisa told her to dig up information and reach out to all these people to come back at Meredith. Meredith is taken aback by this information, but she slightly doesn't believe it because she's just like, I don't know why Lisa would want to do that, especially when we're in a good place. But also Angie has lied on me for the past 2 years, so why would I believe what she is saying? And Meredith ends up telling Angie, girl, you know I'm gonna have to tell her this like here soon. And Angie ends up saying, well, I think you should tell her that. And I'm like, Angie, you doing a lot. You doing a lot. And I don't know how this is gonna pan out for you. Because I'm like, girl, why wouldn't you just tell her this? Why didn't you tell her this last season? Why are we waiting now to like throw Lisa under the bus? Because I do believe Lisa probably did do that. But I'm like, why are we waiting now? And it's like, why couldn't you tell her last season or beforehand? It just, I don't respect when people do that. Because you should have told me when it was happening. Because Angie goes on to say, like, I would never do something like that, but I don't believe that about you, Angie, either. But yeah, that's how the episode ends. So I wonder what next episode is going to be like. If when Meredith confronts Lisa, if she going to own it or not. I don't know. But that is all I got for you guys today. As always, remember to be brave, be authentic. Definitely hop down in the comments below and subscribe. And I'm out, y'all. Deuces.